When Evelyn Carter locked eyes with the janitor, she didn't expect him to sit across from her chessboard, much less win in 21 moves. The glass walls of the 55th floor boardroom bathed the room in the last golden rays of a Chicago sunset. The city stretched far and wide beneath her, a glittering jungle of ambition and asphalt. Evelyn sat alone at the sleek marble table, fingers resting lightly on a white pawn, eyes fixed not on the piece, but on the emptiness of her own reflection in the polished glass wall across from her. At 35, Evelyn Carter was the youngest CEO in the history of Carter & Company Financial, a firm founded by her grandfather and transformed by her own relentless will. Her reputation was legendary, brilliant, strategic, icy. She had turned the family firm into a national powerhouse, and in the process hardened herself into something almost mythic, untouchable, flawless, feared, but not loved. Never that. The chessboard before her was her private ritual. In the world of business, she played with billions. But here, at the end of each long day, she returned to the simpler game of strategy and order. Chess, her father's favorite game. Though he had long since retired, his voice still echoed in her head during every move. Control the center, don't gamble, punish every mistake. The soft hum of the elevator opening behind her barely drew her attention. She had dismissed her staff hours ago. But then came the sound of a cart rolling gently, efficiently, like it belonged. She looked up. A tall black man in gray janitor's coveralls pushed the cart inside, quiet and methodical. He moved with the grace of someone used to being invisible. She had seen him before, hadn't she? Always around after hours, never intrusive, always professional. His presence should have been unremarkable. Yet today, something about him, maybe the way his eyes briefly locked on the board, made her pause. He moved past the doorway, but not without another glance at the pieces. Not nosy, not disrespectful, just interested. Evelyn, in a moment of whimsical recklessness she hardly understood, leaned back in her chair and asked, "You play?" The janitor stopped. He didn't smile, didn't fidget, just met her eyes evenly. "Yes, ma'am." She tilted her head, intrigued. "How well?" His gaze didn't flicker. "Well enough." There was something oddly unsettling about his stillness. Most men, especially ones unused to being addressed by someone like her, would have stammered or blushed. But this man stood there like he belonged in the room, like the silence didn't bother him, like her title meant nothing. Evelyn narrowed her eyes with a smirk. "All right, then. Let's make it interesting. Beat me, and I'll marry you." The words came out sharper than she intended. Half challenge, half jest. She expected him to chuckle, brush it off, maybe nod, and go back to work. That's how this game usually went. But he didn't laugh. "I play for real," he said simply. That knocked the smirk right off her face. Something shifted in her chest, an unexpected flutter, part surprise, part annoyance. She hadn't meant it seriously. It was a power move, a flex. But this man, this janitor, he wasn't playing her game. Or worse, he was, and he was playing it better. "You're serious?" she asked, voice slightly quieter. He stepped forward, posture relaxed, hands folded in front of him. "Only if you are." A beat of silence passed, then another. Evelyn considered brushing it off, calling security, laughing it away. But instead, she stood, motioned to the seat across from her, and said, "Then sit down. Let's see what you've got." The man walked forward, unhurried, and pulled out the chair. As he sat, Evelyn noticed his movements, precise, controlled. There was no hesitation, no deference, only calm. He leaned forward, eyes scanning the board. Then, in a voice low and even, he said, "Queen's Gambit, classical variation. You like controlling the center. Solid, predictable." Her mouth went dry. He wasn't guessing. He was analyzing, like a pro. "You know your openings," she replied coolly, picking up a pawn. "And you speak like someone who's done this before." He smiled faintly. "I don't often lose." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "We're alike, then." She made the first move. The white pawn slid forward with a quiet tap. The game had begun. The room grew still as the light faded into twilight. Move by move, they fell into rhythm, one piece after another, a silent battle unfolding across 64 squares. The only sound was the soft clicks of marble on marble, and the occasional breath held a beat too long. At first, Evelyn attacked hard, aggressive, dominant, her classic style. But he parried smoothly, no flashy counters, just steady, disciplined replies. She felt like she was fighting a ghost. No ego, no nerves, only clarity. By the 8th move, she was rattled. By the 10th, sweating. The janitor, Malcolm Hayes, according to the name patch on his shirt, was no mere hobbyist. He was setting traps. Evelyn leaned forward, trying to read his face. Nothing. No smirk, no challenge, just focus. She launched a fierce offensive, sacrificing a knight to break his defenses. But Malcolm responded with elegance, an unexpected series of moves that forced her queen into retreat. She tried to recover. Too late. He struck. On the 21st move, he placed his knight, then looked up. His voice was almost gentle. "Checkmate." Evelyn froze. The board spun before her eyes. Her king lay cornered, no escape. She stared at the board, then at him. No gloating, no swagger, just quiet finality. He stood, reset the pieces slowly, carefully. When he finished, he met her gaze one last time. "Thank you for the game," he said. "It's been a long time since I felt fully myself." Then he wheeled his card away and left. Evelyn didn't move for a long time. The marble felt cold beneath her fingertips. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile what had just happened. She had lost, badly, to a janitor. And somehow, she didn't feel insulted. She felt intrigued. Her eyes dropped to the black knight still resting where he'd placed it. That move, that calm, that control. She whispered his name, barely audible. Malcolm Hayes. And for the first time in years, Evelyn Carter had no idea what her next move would be. What kind of janitor speaks like a scholar, moves like a grandmaster, and disappears before she can ask his name? That night, Evelyn Carter lay awake in her penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, the skyline a jagged silhouette against the dark. She had left the office hours ago, yet her mind was still locked on the chessboard. Specifically, the 21st move, and the man who'd made it. Malcolm Hayes. She had never heard the name before. And yet, he had managed to dismantle her in less than a half hour, not just on the board, but in every assumption she'd ever made about people who worked the night shift. The next morning, Evelyn arrived at the office earlier than usual. She ignored the emails, skipped her executive assistant's rundown, and instead walked straight to human resources. A surprised HR manager raised an eyebrow as she requested access to a specific personnel file. Normally, this would go through protocols. But she was the CEO. She didn't need permission. She typed Malcolm Hayes into the system. A few entries popped up. Male, age 39, widower. Employed as a facilities technician at Carter & Cohen for 2 years. One dependent, a daughter named Amara Hayes, age 8. No red flags, no complaints, no missed shifts. Evelyn frowned. Everything was ordinary. Too ordinary. Until she scrolled further and caught a small, easily overlooked line under Previous Occupation, International Chess Master. FIDE rating, 24 and 37. She sat back, stunned. FIDE was the real deal. International ranking, top tier. She opened a new browser window and typed his name into the U.S. Chess Federation archives. Dozens of articles appeared, most over a decade old. Malcolm Hayes, America's New Hope. The next Bobby Fischer? A teenage prodigy from the Bronx, Malcolm had stunned the chess world at 16, rising through national ranks with uncanny speed. Photos showed a young man, eyes bright, posture proud, accepting trophies from legendary players. Headlines raved about his potential, his strategic mind, his composure under pressure. Evelyn clicked through each article, mesmerized. Then the trail stopped abruptly. No rankings, no tournament records, nothing for the last 8 years. She dug deeper, pulling up old regional news pieces. One article finally explained it. Hayes withdraws from international finals following wife's terminal diagnosis. Lisa Hayes, cancer, terminal, died within the year. Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. Another piece filled in more gaps. After Lisa's death, Malcolm became sole caregiver to their infant daughter, Amara, who was later diagnosed with severe pediatric asthma. No family support, no fallback. Chess couldn't pay the bills, so Malcolm took the janitor job for the insurance. Evelyn closed the laptop and stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows. A man who had once stood on global stages now mopped floors in her building. Not because he failed, but because he loved. The contrast hit her hard. She thought back to his posture during their match. Calm, dignified. No resentment, no attempt to prove himself. Just a man doing what he was good at, because someone dared challenge him. And she had, with mockery. She rose from her chair and grabbed her coat. An impulse carried her through the streets of downtown Chicago, past high-rises and boutiques, until she reached a modest neighborhood near Bronzeville. It didn't take much to find the address. She recognized the number from his file. She parked across the street and sat in the car, engine off. Through the window of a small brick building, she could see soft yellow light spilling from inside. The apartment wasn't much. Old siding, no front yard, but it was tidy, lived in, warm. And then she saw them. Malcolm kneeling beside a small table, helping a little girl with her homework. The girl, Amara, no doubt, laughed as she showed him something, maybe a drawing. He ruffled her curly hair, then walked to the stove where something bubbled in a pot. He moved like he had in the boardroom, quiet, purposeful, composed. Evelyn felt a strange pressure in her chest. This wasn't some broken man clinging to past glory. This was someone who had redefined strength. She sat there for a long time, watching. Eventually, Malcolm pulled Amara into his lap and opened a book, reading aloud. Her tiny hand rested over his heart. Evelyn blinked back something she refused to call tears. She had power, wealth, prestige. But watching them, she saw something she'd never had. Real love, not calculated, not strategic, just there, simple and true. As she started her car again, the streetlight overhead flickered to life. Evelyn drove off into the night, the city lights blurring in her peripheral vision. She had come looking for answers about a man who had embarrassed her. What she found was a father who had given up everything to protect the only thing that mattered. And suddenly, the woman who once thought herself the sharpest mind in any room realized she might have been blind all along. It took only one leaked video to bring down a legacy built over decades. The sun had barely climbed above the horizon when Evelyn's phone buzzed with an unusual urgency. A rapid succession of texts, flagged emails, and 2 missed calls from the head of PR, all before 7 a.m. Something was wrong. She was still in bed, hair unbrushed, fingers curling tightly around the phone as she opened the company's internal messaging app. At first, it wouldn't load. Then the screen flooded with red dot notifications and a scrolling feed of reactions, memes, screenshots, comments, and the video. It started innocently enough, grainy footage from a corner security camera in the 55th floor boardroom. Evelyn sitting at her usual place, a chessboard between her and a man in a janitor's uniform. The angle didn't have sound, but the subtitle captions, courtesy of some overly ambitious intern, filled in the blanks. Win, and I'll marry you. Then it showed them playing. Malcolm's calm posture, Evelyn's increasing agitation. And finally, the moment he made the final move. Checkmate. The video cut to Evelyn's stunned face, frozen in defeat. The internet, of course, had its way with it. Had CEO. Checkmated was trending. So was #Knight to wife. Some laughed, some mocked, some were furious. The narrative fractured immediately. To some, Evelyn Carter was a privileged white woman demeaning an underpaid black janitor in a bizarre power play. To others, she was the victim of a prankster who used an innocent game to shame her publicly. And then there were those who didn't care about either, just enjoying the spectacle. Within hours, media outlets picked up the story. Chess, class, and corporate drama, one headline read. Another simply, CEO loses game and maybe her mind. She stared at the screen, her stomach twisting. How the hell had the footage gotten out? Travis Coleman. It had to be him, a junior associate with a history of pushing boundaries and a long-standing grudge after being passed over for a promotion. He was in charge of IT audits last month. Access to internal feeds wouldn't have been difficult for someone with clearance and an agenda. Evelyn's jaw clenched. She was still staring at the screen when her office line rang. It was her father. "Is it true?" Gerald Carter's voice was low and cold, like an accusation wrapped in disappointment. "I didn't mean it seriously," she said quietly. "Doesn't matter," he snapped. "The board's furious. Our image is bleeding out in real time. Investors are calling. Damage control starts now." She could hear voices in the background. Advisors, legal teams, PR strategists. "You brought this on yourself," he added. "A Carter doesn't joke about marriage with janitors. Not publicly, not ever." Evelyn hung up without responding. At the office, the mood was unusually hushed. People averted their eyes, whispered in corners, tapped nervously at keyboards. Evelyn pushed through the halls like a storm brewing under a tailored suit. She made it to her office, slammed the door, and stood in silence. Malcolm. What must he be thinking? She hadn't seen him since that night. No messages, no appearance. Just that moment on the board, and then gone. But he would have seen the video by now. Her assistant buzzed in. "There's someone here to see you." "Who?" she snapped. A pause. "Malcolm Hayes." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "Send him in." He entered slowly, in plain clothes this time. Dark jeans, clean button-up, same unshakable calm. But his eyes, they weren't soft like before. "You wanted to see me?" he asked. "No," she said quickly. "I mean, yes, God, Malcolm, I'm sorry. This whole thing, it's a nightmare." He remained silent. "I didn't know someone had recorded it. I didn't even realize we had cameras in that room." His voice, when it came, was even. "It's a corporate building. Of course you have cameras." She flinched. "I didn't mean to embarrass you." "I'm not embarrassed," he said simply. "Are you?" That stopped her. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned away and stared out the window, trying to collect herself. I wanted to apologize for everything." "For making a joke out of a person?" he asked. "Or for losing to one?" She spun around, eyes blazing. "That's not fair. And neither is life, Evelyn. I get it. I've been black and underestimated longer than you've been alive." His words hit like a slap, not cruel, but true. "You think I did this?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "That I leaked it?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't want to believe that, but I don't know you well enough to be sure." That stung more than anything else. She stepped forward, a rawness in her tone now. "I came to your neighborhood, you know. I saw you with your daughter. I saw how good you are. That wasn't a game to me." "Wasn't it?" He turned to leave. She stopped him. "Malcolm, please." He looked at her then, tired and disappointed. "You didn't see me, Evelyn. You saw a story, a twist ending. something that shook up your perfect narrative, but I'm not here to play the role you wrote for me." And with that, he walked out. She didn't chase him. Instead, she sank into the nearest chair, numb, heart heavy. Outside, the city buzzed. Screens flashed headlines. Phones pinged. The world kept spinning. Inside her office, Evelyn Carter sat in silence, the sound of her own breath loud in the stillness. For the first time in her career, she had no plan. And worse, no one left to blame but herself. One desperate phone call shattered all that Pride had built. It had been 3 weeks since Malcolm walked out of her office. 3 weeks since the media storm reached its peak and began to slowly fade, leaving behind only bruised reputations and cautious silence. Evelyn had weathered PR crises before, but this was different. This one had left a mark, not just on her name, but on something much deeper. She no longer played chess at the office, no longer stayed late, no longer heard her own voice in meetings the same way. She had tried, more than once, to reach out. A message, a call, even a handwritten note sent through HR. All unanswered. And so, when her personal phone rang at 1:37 a.m. with an unknown number from a local area code, she almost ignored it. Almost. She answered on the third ring, voice groggy. "Hello?" A long pause. Then a voice, low and broken. "It's Malcolm." She sat upright, heart suddenly thudding. "It's Amara," he said. "She's not breathing right. I called an ambulance, but I need help, Evelyn, please." There was no hesitation. "I'm on my way." Northwestern Memorial Hospital loomed large in the night, its emergency entrance glowing sterile white under the moonlight. Evelyn's car screeched to a halt at the curb, barely parked before she leapt out. Her coat flapped behind her as she pushed through the sliding glass doors. At the check-in desk, she flashed her ID, not as the CEO of Carter & Company, but as someone desperate. "I'm here for a little girl, Amara Hayes. She was brought in a few minutes ago." The nurse barely had time to respond before Evelyn spotted Malcolm down the hallway, hunched in a plastic chair outside the ICU, head in his hands. She rushed to him. He looked up, eyes red, face drawn tight with fear and exhaustion. "They're trying to stabilize her," he said. "She stopped breathing in the middle of the night. I used the inhaler, but it wasn't enough." Evelyn sat beside him, resting a hand on his back. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, just sat, trembling. "I called because," he whispered, "I didn't know who else would come." She squeezed his shoulder gently. "You called the right person." A doctor appeared moments later, a tall woman in blue scrubs and a focused expression. "She's stable now," the doctor said softly. "Still critical, but breathing on her own. We'll monitor her overnight, but she's past the worst of it." Malcolm stood, nodding quickly, eyes glassy. Evelyn's breath finally released. She hadn't even realized she'd been holding it. "Can we see her?" Malcolm asked. "Only one parent for now," the doctor replied gently. "She's resting." Malcolm looked at Evelyn, unsure. "Go," she said. "I'll wait here." He disappeared through the ICU doors. The hallway was quiet. Evelyn sat alone under the hum of fluorescent lights, her heels beside her on the floor, bare feet tucked under the seat. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from relief, from the sheer weight of the moment. She thought about the headlines, the shame, the silence. None of it mattered here. What mattered was the 8-year-old girl behind those doors, and the man who had never stopped fighting for her. When Malcolm returned 30 minutes later, his face looked softer, worn, but peaceful. "She's asleep," he said. "The nurse said I can stay with her overnight." Evelyn stood, brushing back her hair. "I'll stay too, if you want." He hesitated, then nodded. They sat side by side again in the same plastic chairs, this time without walls between them. "Why did you really come?" he asked after a while. "Because I owed you more than an apology," she replied. "Because I was wrong, about everything." He didn't respond, but his silence no longer felt cold. It felt open. "I saw you with Amara," she continued, "the night after our match. I watched you read to her. I saw something I never had growing up." He turned to her. "You didn't have that?" She shook her head. "I had money, expectations, public appearances, but not warmth, not home." He leaned back, eyes closed briefly. "You have no idea how hard it was to call you tonight." "I can imagine." "No," he said, "you can't, because part of me still didn't trust you. But I trusted that you would show up for her." Evelyn looked at him carefully. "And did I?" "You did," he said simply. There was a long pause. Then she said, "I want to help. Really help. Not just tonight." He studied her. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't want this, us, to be something we both walk away from because of pride or fear or what people think. I don't care about that anymore." Malcolm looked at her for a long time, then whispered, "I want to believe you. Then let me prove it." Another silence, heavier this time. Finally, he reached for her hand. She let him take it. Outside the ICU window, the first light of dawn began to stretch across the skyline. The city stirred. Horns honked in the distance. Life resumed. But inside that small hallway, time slowed. Two people who once lived worlds apart now sat close, fingers intertwined, breathing the same quiet air. And for the first time since that fateful chess match, they were no longer on opposite sides of the board. They were on the same team. She stood before the world, not as a CEO, but as a woman in love with the man they told her to reject. 2 days after Amara's emergency, Evelyn Carter stood at her penthouse window, staring down at the city that had both made her and nearly broken her. Her reflection was sharp in the glass, perfect hair, tailored suit, high heels, but inside she was anything but polished. She hadn't been back to the office, not since that night at the hospital. Instead, she'd spent the last 48 hours in quiet conversations, with Malcolm, with Amara, and most painfully, with herself. This wasn't about damage control anymore. It was about choosing who she wanted to be. At 10 a.m. sharp, she arrived at the Chicago Convention Center, flanked by 2 assistants and her lawyer. A press conference had been scheduled. Cameras were already set up. News anchors buzzed with anticipation. The last time Evelyn Carter had faced this kind of media storm, she'd been celebrating a merger. Today would be nothing like that. She stood behind the podium, a dozen microphones pointed toward her like weapons. Reporters quieted. The room fell still. Evelyn took a breath. Her voice was calm, steady. "Good morning," she began. "I'm not here today as the CEO of Carter & Comey Financial. I resigned from that position this morning." The room gasped. Cameras clicked. A low murmur rippled through the audience. "I stepped down because I realized something," she continued. "Titles mean nothing if you lose sight of the truth." She paused, looking straight ahead. 3 weeks ago, a video was leaked that showed me playing a game of chess with one of our night staff members. What most people saw was a joke or a scandal, but what they didn't see was the truth, that I met a man who challenged me, not just on a chessboard, but in every assumption I'd ever made. Her voice wavered slightly, but she pushed through. "His name is Malcolm Hayes. He's a father, a former international chess master, and the best man I've ever met." A beat of silence. "I fell in love with him." Gasps again, louder this time. Reporters scribbled furiously. "I understand the optics. I understand the backlash, but I refuse to hide behind a title while the man I love is ridiculed for his job, his past, or his race." Cameras zoomed in. Flashbulbs fired. "I've made mistakes. I let fear and ego dictate too many things, but I won't let them dictate this. Not anymore." She stepped away from the podium and exited the stage, ignoring shouted questions. Outside the convention center, the air was thick with media vans and flashing lights. Evelyn slipped into the back seat of a car and shut the door, heart pounding. The driver turned. "Home, Ms. Carter?" She hesitated. "No, Bronzeville." Malcolm stood on his porch, watching her car pull up. Amara peeked through the blinds beside him, then dashed to the door with a grin. "She's here," the little girl whispered. He opened the door before Evelyn could knock. She stood there in her suit, windswept, breathless. "You saw it?" she asked. He nodded. "Live." She looked nervous now, a rare sight. "I meant every word," she said, especially the last part. Malcolm studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. "You coming in?" Evelyn smiled. "Only if I get to help with dinner." Amara giggled from the kitchen. "She can make grilled cheese." Evelyn laughed. "I make a mean grilled cheese." Malcolm chuckled. "That I gotta see." As she stepped inside, the door closed behind her, not shutting her out, but letting her in. Later that evening, after dinner and bedtime stories, Malcolm and Evelyn sat on the front steps, watching the neighborhood settle into quiet. "You really gave it all up," he said softly. "I didn't lose anything worth keeping," she replied. He looked at her, eyes searching. "And what now?" "We build something better," she said. "Together." He reached for her hand. She didn't hesitate. And under the soft hum of a street lamp, they sat side by side, not as boss and employee, not as chess opponents, not as a scandal, but simply as two people who chose each other, no matter what the world had to say. Under the spring sun, love rewrote a story that once seemed impossible. Jackson Park, in early April, was a gentle riot of blooming cherry blossoms and soft green leaves. Birds sang high above the ceremony, and the scent of fresh earth filled the air as guests gathered around folding chairs set up in a small circle beneath a large oak. There were no limousines, no media, no designer gowns or guest lists approved by PR firms. Just a little girl in a yellow dress tossing petals down a grass aisle, and a man waiting at the end with tears quietly threatening to fall. Malcolm Hayes stood in a simple gray suit, hands clasped, watching as Evelyn Carter, now Hayes in every way that mattered, walked toward him. She wore ivory, no train, no jewels, just a simple dress, soft curls pinned loosely, and a smile that told the truth of everything they had been through. Their guests weren't society's elite. They were neighbors, friends. Two of Evelyn's former assistants, Malcolm's old chess mentor from high school, Amara's school principal, people who mattered. The officiant, a soft-spoken family friend of Malcolm's, spoke of choice, of second chances, of promises that weren't bound by blood or legacy, but by love earned the hard way. When it came time to speak, Evelyn's voice trembled. "I used to think power was everything, that if I had control, I'd never get hurt. But then I met a man who beat me, not with force, but with grace. He showed me that strength is sacrifice, and that love isn't something you win, it's something you give." Malcolm cleared his throat. "I thought I'd used up my one great love, that Lisa had been it. But then you came crashing into my life, Evelyn Carter, like a storm I didn't ask for, but needed more than I knew. You make me braver, sharper, softer, all at once." They laughed quietly. Amara sniffled loudly. Everyone chuckled. The vows were sealed with a kiss beneath a canopy of blossoms. That night, there was no reception hall, just dinner at home. Malcolm cooked. Evelyn insisted on washing dishes. Amara danced barefoot on the tile floor to old Stevie Wonder tracks. There was cake, laughter, candlelight. They didn't need speeches or first dances. They had each other. 2 years later, the front porch of the Hayes home creaked under the weight of evening sun. Malcolm sat in a rocking chair, teaching chess to a group of neighborhood kids. The board was old, but the lessons were sharp. Inside, Evelyn was on a video call with a local nonprofit, organizing financial literacy classes for single parents. Amara, now 10, zipped around the yard with a water gun, squealing with delight. When the day wound down, they sat on the steps, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea. Malcolm glanced over. "Remember when you thought a game of chess could undo your whole life?" Evelyn smiled. "It did, in the best way." He kissed her temple. "You gave me a second life." She leaned against him. "No, we built a new one together." They watched as Amara chased fireflies under a darkening sky, and Evelyn whispered, more to herself than to him, "This right here, this is all I ever needed." Sometimes, the most unexpected journeys begin with a simple question across a chessboard. In this story, what started as a challenge between two very different people quietly unraveled assumptions, softened defenses, and led to something much stronger than any victory: mutual respect, love, and healing. What lingers long after the vows, the headlines, or even the applause is not the spectacle, but the simple, powerful reminder that character is rarely loud, and dignity doesn't wear a name tag. Malcolm Hayes never raised his voice. He never had to. He stood firm, not with outrage, but with presence. And in doing so, he showed that grace, even when unrecognized, can shift the ground beneath those who once looked down on you. The story's lesson is clear, yet never forced. We live in a world where appearances still speak too loudly. But true justice, the kind that brings families together, mends generational divides, and restores broken trust, often rises from where no one is looking. Within the Black community, this truth has echoed for generations. Time and again, individuals have had to prove their worth beyond the uniforms they wear, the neighborhoods they live in, or the jobs they hold, not for glory, but just to be seen. Evelyn's transformation reminds us that redemption doesn't come from grand gestures, but from everyday courage, to listen instead of assume, to stand up when it's easier to remain silent, and to love even when it's not applauded. That's a lesson not just for CEOs, but for every one of us. Because in the quiet strength of the Black community lies a wisdom born from survival, and a resilience that continues to teach this country what true leadership looks like. And maybe, just maybe, life's deepest answers come not from the loudest voice in the room, but from the man sweeping its floors. Like the soft porch light left on at dusk, a simple act of respect, given or received, can guide us through the darkest parts of life. Take a moment. Think back to your own stories, the unexpected people who've shaped you, challenged you, or stood by you when others walked away. Sometimes, those moments become your second life. If this story touched your heart, consider passing its warmth forward. Someone in your world, maybe in your family, your church, or your local Black community, might need to hear that they matter, that they are seen, that their quiet strength means everything. Because every voice, no matter how softly it speaks, deserves to be heard. And that is the real checkmate.